Hi there, Steve Kaufman here. Today I want to talk about noticing in language learning. Now, I have said before that I think there are three key elements in language learning, and I was quoting the head of the language department at the University of, or was it the San Diego State University, who said that language learning comes down to attitude, time with the language, not necessarily time in a classroom, but time with the language, and the ability to notice. And I think most people understand that you have to have a positive attitude, you have to like the language, you have to feel that, you're confident that you can learn the language, you like the language, confident that the method you're using is good. So attitude is important. Time, it takes time to learn a language. You have to find the time, you have to, find an hour a day to listen as I do and so forth. But then the final one is sometimes more difficult to explain or describe. In other words, how do we develop this ability to notice what's happening in the language? I mean, we're all aware of the sort of phenomenon that lots of things go by us. We don't notice things. And if we notice something, that a certain brand of car has a certain feature or something else, all of a sudden we start to notice that everywhere. So that noticing something once helps us to notice it in other situations. It's part of the sort of acquiring of knowledge or experience, and I think it applies very much in language learning. And I notice myself that certain things in a language that I'm learning, certain structures, for a long time, or even certain elements of pronunciation, for a long time I don't notice them. Then all of a sudden I start to notice them, and once I notice them in one place, say in a text that I'm reading, then I'll notice it when I listen. And by noticing it in different places, eventually it starts to become part of this new language habit that I'm acquiring for a new language. So what are the things that help me to notice? All right. I have found that our highlighting in LingQ, when I read on the lesson page, helps me to notice. Because if I see a word it's highlighted in blue, well, first of all, I notice that this is a new word for me, because I could possibly read past that and not really notice that this is a word that I haven't come across before. And then if I save that word, it now becomes yellow, and I see the meaning in one of the dictionaries that I've chosen to use at LingQ. So now it's a yellow word. But then the next time that word shows up in a text, it's now highlighted in yellow, which reminds me that I've seen the word before, because actually in many cases, I don't even realize that I've seen that word before. So having it highlighted helps me to notice it. Similarly, if I highlight a phrase, because it contains, say, a tense, or it contains a certain case of a noun or an adjective, I highlight it, it also forces me to notice. When I see that same phrase highlighted in yellow somewhere else, it helps me to notice. Not immediately. I might then forget that, but then I hear it somewhere else or I see it again. So every time that my attention is attracted to this word or structure, it increases the likelihood that I will actually notice it and notice it again and eventually learn it. Another thing that I have found greatly increases my ability to notice is listening to our mini stories, because in the mini stories, which I have listened to 20, 30, 40 times, not all at once. In other words, I'll go lesson 1, lesson 2, lesson 3, up to lesson 10. Then I go back to lesson 1. I mean, it's important to keep these things kind of refreshing. Otherwise, the brain stops learning it. But I find that the 10th time that I listen to this story, which I already know, I know what's in the story, so I'm focusing more on the words and phrases, and I notice things. I notice words, I notice different forms of a verb, I notice certain structures which I didn't notice before. And so that the repetitive listening to, say, a story where I'm no longer sort of focusing on what's going to happen in the story, but I'm focusing on the language, this helps me to notice. So another thing, of course, is, I have to want to notice. I have to want to notice. I'm not just, taking in noise. I'm actually motivated to want to notice words and structures in the language. I want my brain to create some new, patterns so that I can, get these new language habits so that eventually I can use the language. So I'm motivated to acquire new habits. I'm motivated to notice. The other thing, of course, that helps you to notice is the more you read and listen, then there are more and more things that you already know. So therefore, just as say with a jigsaw puzzle, then the things that you don't know stand out. So you have a better chance of noticing these things because they stand out as being, things that you don't know, because all the other stuff is known. If everything is new, there's a lot of stuff that goes by you that you just don't notice. So in a way, language acquisition is a process of noticing more and more things. And as you notice them, they gradually become part of a new language habit, which you have to acquire in order to become not only someone who understands the language, but also someone who can speak the language. So just some thoughts on noticing as an important part of language acquisition. Thank you for listening. Bye for now.